Welcome to the First Things First podcast. And first things first, we need you to subscribe and leave comments letting us know what you think of the show. We're listening. I'm Nick Wright, joined by two of my favorite people, Jenna Wolfe, Cris Carter. Now, let's get the show started.
Oh, hey there, everyone. Welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer, Cris Carter. As always, this is Nick Wright. It is Monday. It's good to be here. How's everybody's weekend?
Good.
Yeah?
Good. Great football weekend.
Great football weekend.
It was horrifying.
Made a couple nice bets.
Yeah. The Chiefs, why do I let them pull me in, CC?
Because you're from Kansas City.
I said all
this
year.
way.
Yeah, no, I'm ashamed to even look in the camera right now. I should have known better.
Maybe you should look at getting another T-shirt.
What is it? It's
Kansas City is for chokers.
That's what
is what the T-shirt should say.
And I think we'll sell a lot of them. I think we'll sell a lot of them.
I was rooting for you, Nick. I even tweeted out something rooting for you.
I think that tweet was actually the moment the game changed. So thank you, Jenna.
You are.
I can't say I was rooting for him, but I was betting on the other team.
Oh my.
Well, there were three other games that tried to redeem themselves this weekend. And let's start with one of those games, the Panthers and Saints. Cam Newton versus Drew Brees, overstyled versus understated. In this one, went to New Orleans. Drew threw for 376 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it turned out the Saints needed all of that as they were held to just 41 yards on the ground. On the other side, Cam Newton had 349 yards and 2 touchdowns in the loss. So Carolina's going home. Saints are marching on. Both quarterbacks spoke after the game.
We knew this was going to be an extremely tough task. We knew we needed to play a near flawless game and make the plays when we needed to make them. And we were able to do that, and it was a team effort. And so there's no better feeling than knowing that, man, you just won, and not only won, but you won a playoff game as a team, and now you're on to the next one.
We didn't come here, just to get a shot. We came here to win, and that's what we didn't do. I kind of caught a sense of a lot of people just being satisfied with being in the playoffs. But neither here nor there, I will learn from this, and I will get better from it.
We talked all week about whether the Saints could beat this Carolina team 3 times in one season. They had beaten them twice coming in. CC, I'll start with you. What was your biggest takeaway from this game?
A very good football game, and you could see the biggest takeaway would be that New Orleans is a more balanced team. And I think that this might be not the most talented team that Drew Brees has played on, but it's a one that they don't rely on him. But, man, is Drew Brees a great quarterback. And I just think in this era with Brady, with Manning, with Ben, with Aaron Rodgers, this guy right here does not get the credit that he deserves. If you look at Jen, he is probably the best passer of the football that we've ever seen from a percentage standpoint. Not the best arm, not the best height, not the best football measurables, but as far as throwing the football. Nick, you have those blind reveals. Man, if we had a blind reveal with him, you would never believe. This guy is barely 6 foot. He owns 4 of the top 10 all-time completions percentages. He just completed this season 72% of his passes. Now, everyone's talked about Kamara this year, Ingram. Yes, it's been great. But you take them away, they have 40 yards rushing yesterday. And who took over? And the reason why this team is so scary, because arguably, he's the best quarterback in the playoffs. Even with Brady and Ben, you could compare Drew Brees or put them on those teams, and those teams would not miss a beat. So for me, the biggest takeaway was, man, are we really giving this guy enough credit for how good he is? And there is no bigger thing for a quarterback than throwing accuracy. And that's what you're able to see with Drew Brees. It was a pleasure to see. He is truly one of the greatest players, and we need to give him his due respect while he's playing.
It was a remarkable performance by a remarkable player in Drew Brees. If going into that game you had told me the Saints were going to run the ball 22 times for 41 yards, that Kamara and Ingram were going to combine for 68 yards from scrimmage, 68 on 21 touches, that Cam was going to play a brilliant football game, a game better than his 105 passer rating and 349 yards really even dictate given the circumstances, and that Carolina was going to win the turnover battle. I wouldn't have thought there was any way the Panthers could lose that game. But they did because this year the Saints have a luxury no team to me in modern memory has, which is our backup plan is one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks ever. Think about that. Their backup plan going into games is if we can't get Ingram going and we can't get Kamara going, we are going to go to our first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. And that's why the Saints were able to hang on this game. That's why I didn't think their defense was particularly great, except for they made 3 key third down stops in the red zone.
In this NFL, all you have to do is be good in the red zone.
Yep.
I mean, we talk about New England all the time, but you can see, man, what it does when you hold a team to 3 points. Man, it's a huge momentum swing for the defense, and if you can do it multiple times, which they were able to do.
Or on the Panthers, not their opening drive, but their opening extended drive, hold a team to 0 points. And that wasn't even the defense doing it. Cam puts the ball on Kalen Clay's hands. He drops it. Then Graham Gano, who, I mean, not to bring up bad memories, it reminded me of Gary Anderson in the 98 Vikings. Graham Gano came in. No,
it's not Gary Anderson. Don't bring that up.
I apologize.
And it's actually, we were actually in NFC playoffs.
Nice.
Don't do that. This is the wild card round.
Hold up.
And the guy went on to play great afterwards.
I only said that because Gary in that year hadn't missed a kick all year until he did in the playoff game. Graham Gano had missed 1 kick all year. He was 44 for 44 in his Panthers career on kicks inside the 30. And what happens on his opening kick of the game? He shanks it right. After the Panthers don't leave 4 on the board. They leave a full 7 on the board because of that. And that's where I want to talk about the other quarterback, Cam Newton. Because, man, I've watched enough Cam in my life and in his career to know when something like that, a stomach punch goes against him early, you're usually not going to get his best performance. And Cece, we were texting throughout the game. I thought Cam was outstanding yesterday. The only player on the field better than him was Drew Brees, and it was close. I thought Cam overcame that. He overcame his total lack of weapons, aside from Greg Olsen.
Yes.
And I mentioned the Kalen Clay drop in the end zone. There's another play after the intentional grounding play on 3rd and 23, down 5 to win the game. I thought he threw a darn near perfect ball to Devin Funchess that Funchess just couldn't adjust for in the front corner of the end zone. I thought, Cam, if you can help yourself as far as reputation in a playoff loss, if that is even possible, Cam did it yesterday. Yeah,
this is the thing, and I have to admit, we all as human beings, we have blind spots. And for me, I'm going to tell you for a full reveal, I have different expectations of different players. One of the reasons why I'm critical of Des Bryant is because I've seen him for a long time. I see his talent level, and my expectations are for him to be better. I have the same expectations I have with Sammy Watkins. All right, unbelievable. Dominated college football as a freshman, not able to transition to Buffalo and seeing it with the Rams. I'm the same way with Cam Newton, and I realize that. Why? Because I saw him in high school. I saw him in college, up close and personal. I know what ability he has. Carolina's got to help Cam out. They got to give him some weapons. Now, Cam's got to work on his game where he could be that type of pocket passer every game, but they got to help him and give him more talent on the outside difference maker because, yes, the difference in this game was Drew Brees and Cam Newton, but it wasn't the quality of their play. It's who they were throwing to. I mean, Michael Thomas, Teddy Ginn. I mean, Drew Brees, both of his running backs. So, Carolina, I know the team's up for sale. Man, get yourself some explosive players to be able to help out one of the great young players we have in the league in Cam Newton.
Look, clearly Carolina came in with a game plan that they executed perfectly. Stop the run. That's what they wanted to do. They had these 2 guys that had played lights out in Kamara and Ingram, and they did just that, held them to 40 yards. What they didn't account for was Drew Brees playing as well as he could possibly play, spreading the ball to, like you said, to as many different weapons as you possibly can. And so we're going to talk about this a lot throughout the show, but I'm just curious as to something you said earlier, which is why do you think it is that Drew Brees doesn't get the respect of the other guys, the Tom Bradys, the Aaron Rodgers, all these guys that are doing the same thing if his completion record? It can't be his height.
Well, this is the thing. I think that we're in an era that's very, very strange. And I think if Drew Brees was able to get himself another Super Bowl, if he had 2 Super Bowls, like Eli, like Big Ben.
But Aaron Rodgers doesn't.
Aaron Rodgers is on a different level. Aaron Rodgers' arm talent is undeniable. Drew Brees is undersized kid. He's the gym rat. In basketball, you pick him the last guy on your team. He's the kid at the football that brings all the footballs and will do all the – he is a gym rat. You're never going to pick him first, but his teams are going to finish first an awful lot. It's just there's so many quarterbacks in this golden age of throwing. Because of Sean Payton and because their offense, Drew Brees doesn't get enough credit. Yeah. But if you can see what he's done this year – Kamara and Ingram's success, it's not based on their offensive line. It's not based on they're just great runners. It's based on they also have to play coverage because Drew Brees is there. In this game, they stacked the box, and Drew Brees picked them apart. Yeah. So that's the great combination that they have there in New Orleans.
And the other reason, Jenna, is because Drew Brees the last few years hasn't been playing relevant games. Not because he hasn't played well.
Yeah, because his numbers are good.
His numbers have been outstanding.
You're right.
People have said, the Saints are always going to throw for a ton of yards, and they're going to go 7-9. Yep. They're going to go 6-10. Like, so Aaron Rodgers, he hasn't been to a Super Bowl since they won it, but he's been to the playoffs every single year until this year. Brady, we know, is always in the playoffs. Big Ben's been in 3 Super Bowls. So, like, that's not on Drew Brees, not to my eyes. It has been. We've talked a lot about how the Packers don't put enough talent around Aaron Rodgers. The Saints, for a half-decade, neglected the defense or mismanaged the defense to where they couldn't play in relevant games.
Jenna, they have played, say, 4 out of the last 6 years. I'm talking about some of the worst defenses in the history of the NFL.
Right.
Now, we normally put the standard on if you're a great quarterback, you can get your team to the playoff. We know Drew Brees and what he's been dealing with. Now they've got that rectified, and we see the results.
And lastly, the division he's in is tough. Like, the division he's in, the last 2 years he's had the Super Bowl.
They got 2 of the 4 teams playing in the Final Four.
Right, and the Carolina's right there. So, like, all those things go into it. I thought that was a excellent football game and super fun to watch. Well played by everyone involved.
All right, so the Falcons took care of business Saturday in Los Angeles. They beat the Rams 26-13. Matt Ryan threw for 218 yards and found Julio Jones for an 8-yard touchdown to seal the deal in the fourth quarter. Julio finished with 9 catches for 94 yards. This spoiled a decent playoff debut for one Jared Goff. He threw for 259 yards, a touchdown, had no picks on the day. Here is Matt Ryan and Sean McVay after the game.
We're not here just to get here. We want to make noise while we're here. And so, this is what it's all about. It's about giving yourself the opportunity, this time of the year to compete and play in games like this and to win games like this.
I don't think this game was too big for our players. We're a young football team. We didn't make enough plays tonight to be able to get it done, but I don't think that means that it was too big for our guys. I do think that they'll look at it and say, how can we learn from the things that occurred in this game if we're fortunate enough to even be in this position again?
Still excited at his post-game press conferences. Win or lose, season's over. He's still excited. So we talked about this high, potent Rams offense, that there was nothing that could derail them. They were running the ball. They were throwing the ball. Like, they were just on fire. What happened to them yesterday?
Anytime you're an offensive-dominated team and you get into a tournament, this is not basketball where you're playing a series, 2 out of 3. So a lot of times the best team is not going to win. It's who can play the best football. Now, the Rams, I can guarantee you today that they are a lot more conscious as far as the pressure and some of the things that happen in a playoff game that are different than the regular season. Now, they can stay there with their same lie and be like, you know something? Inexperience doesn't play a part. But you know who always says that? It's not the team with experience. Right. It's always the team with inexperience. Oh, you know, it doesn't matter. I talked to you about that. Yeah, inexperience, it don't matter till you do a TV show and you've been doing radio. It does matter. Repetitions do matter. How you play the playoff game is different. Now, Todd Gurley only getting 14 carries, that's one of the reasons why they are packed up and playing golf today. Another reason is...
Before you move on, I just want to tell the audience, it wasn't 14 carries like Alvin Kamara only had 10 because it was unproductive.
Right.
14 carries for 101 yards, over 7 yards per carry, so they were productive carries. Go ahead, CC.
And their inability to score touchdowns in the red zone, not be able to punch it in. I think they were 1 for 4 in red zone trips. That right there, when you are a young football team, it's going to hurt you. Now, I'm not going to say they played the game where the lights and everything were too big for them, but they didn't play like they did during the regular season. Their defense, I know we talk about Aaron Donald, they need to play the run. I mean, I tried to tell you, those sack-happy teams, they rush the passer on every single play. In Atlanta, we've been chastising them all year. Steve Sarkisian, he went back to the Coliseum where he was the head coach, and he dialed up a game plan that was very, very productive. We're going to run the ball. We're going to get Julio Jones involved, and Matty Ice played to the level of which we had expected. This is a good football game for the Atlanta Falcons.
All right, you mentioned it, but I just want to reiterate. The lack of touches for Todd Gurley was a tough one to swallow if you're a Rams fan, because this was a close game at halftime. It's not like they were getting blown out. It was 13-10 at halftime. Just for some context, the Falcons running backs, who I think everyone feels like played pretty well, 32 carries for 106 yards. Todd Gurley.
Over 7 yards a carry.
No, that was the Falcons running backs, 32 for 106.
Right, yes.
And then Gurley, 14 for 101. So 18 fewer carries, almost the same rushing yards. I'm going to point out something. Now I'm going to kind of sway into CeCe's lane. Sometimes when I do this, he starts to smile because I'm totally missing it, but I'm going to take the risk. The Rams have been doing something very interesting all year, which is with their young quarterback and their young coach. He has been talking to Jared Goff until the final cutoff moment. They talked about it on the broadcast. They cut off the mics at 15 seconds. So they let the defense line with whatever personnel's out there. Then he sends in the call, having looked at the defense. What it looked to me like the Falcons were doing was adjusting at the end, was making more late snap adjustments. And Goff, who had the security of Sean McVay, who's a brilliant mind, all year helping him, all of a sudden, he was there by himself.
And it's also one of the reasons why the college players fail in the NFL. In college, they hold up a sheet of paper to tell the guys after they see the defense.
Right.
Now, in defenses in college, they don't have the wherewithal to make the kind of adjustments that NFL teams do, so they could line up in an actual 34 front. And as the play clock begins to get down, because the coach can talk, whoever that is, the coordinator or the head coach can talk to the quarterback until 15 seconds. After that, the quarterback's on his own. That's why Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, these guys are lethal in those last 15 seconds. They caught on to Goff. So the defense, Dan Quinn, a little birdie told them, hey, man, the coach is talking to him to 15 seconds. Let's line up in one thing and then switch. And that's what you're able to see when they have 16 games of the season to go over, and there's a lot more intel, all right, going around the league. You know who Dan Quinn probably called? Pete Carroll.
The guy he was the defensive coordinator for. They played him
mentor.
Twice.
And he probably led him on to the fact that this is what they're doing, switch defenses at the end, and it paid big dividends for the Falcons.
And for Goff, it was his worst game.
Great get, too, Nick, you finding that.
Thank you. It was the worst game in 2 months. I mean, I don't want to. Goff wasn't terrible, but it was the worst game he's played in a couple months. It was the highest scoring offense in the league, averaging 30 points a game. They scored 13 points in the whole game. What was disappointing to me, Jenna, was, yeah, they did look inexperienced. And Farrell Cooper, the punt returner, had a tough game.
Yes.
And things went against him early. I mean, that was 13-10 at halftime. And then in the second half, the Falcons get the kickoff. They have an extended drive, but they only get a field goal. You're down. You've played poorly. You're down 16-10, getting the ball back in the second half, and they couldn't get it going.
The problem is the things that the Rams were so good at during the season, special teams that we talked about, they had some issues with. That offense, we never talked about that much, the Falcons defense. We kept talking about how this Falcons offense was going to generate and get going and moving. Meanwhile, that defense really held them down, and their special teams ended up really hurting them in the end.
I mean, if you said again, Matt Ryan's going to throw for 220, and the Falcons are going to rush for 120, you'd probably say, okay. Like, at the very least, it's going to be a very close game. Like, the Rams are going to be right there, and they just couldn't get their offense going.
Atlanta dominated time of possession. Yeah. Now, if you look at any of the NFL games, I'll get dusty. Maybe we'll do it later on. If you 15 minutes on the plus side in time of possession, 37 minutes to 22, there's a good chance, unless you turn the ball over in those 30, unless you do a Peterman and throw 5 picks or something, like, you are going to win that football game. Great game plan by Atlanta. They held down the Rams offense by what? By staying on the field, by grinding it out, and that is one of the attacks when you have an explosive offense like the Rams have.
The Jaguars beat the Bills in an ugly one on Saturday, their first playoff win since 2008. The Jaguars defense stepping up, no surprise. Now there was Blake Bortles stepping down, held to 87 passing yards. But here is the surprise. Blake Bortles and not Leonard Fournette led the Jaguars with 88 rushing yards. Cece, how should we feel about the Jaguars after this game?
Oh man, this was awful.
Okay, you're tweeting with some of the funnier tweets I actually followed.
Well, I'm just going to tell you, this film is not going to the Hall of Fame from an offensive standpoint.
You think?
This film is not going to a kids' clinic to teach kids how to play the quarterback position, because both these quarterbacks were awful. And I felt bad for the coaches, because I played with some bad quarterbacks. And I knew we had all these nice plays to call. But we took all those good plays back home, because you can't hide your quarterback in the regular season, and you definitely cannot hide him in the postseason.
As much as they tried.
The play, it was just awful. Like, they have no confidence in Blake Bortles. Blake Bortles was scared. This is one of the few times I have seen a starting NFL quarterback, when they called a pass play, that he was apprehensive. And it was basically perfect throwing.
Well,
now, they talk about the wind was blowing a little bit. It's Florida.
Man,
okay?
Listen.
The wind's blowing everywhere.
You've taught me enough about the weather that the announcers kept, and I'm not knocking the announcers, but they kept bringing up the wind. And you could see the flags. And as Jenna taught me last week, sometimes you can see wind when there's a flag involved. And the flags weren't, like, gusting. So I went on the weather app and looked at Jacksonville, Florida. Hand to God, it said 1 mile an hour southeast wind. Now, maybe in the stadium, it was worse than that.
In the booth, it was drafty.
Maybe the oohs and the ahs from the crowd.
Like our studio.
Every time someone dropped back, they were like, ah! Like, maybe that caused the wind. I don't know. So, obviously, both quarterbacks were terrible. But, Cece, another thing you've taught me is let's try to be positive about things. So, I do want to talk about, in this game, you're going to say what could have been positive.
Thank you. Help us.
Okay. The story going into this game was, A, will LaShawn McCoy play? And he did. And he was the Bills' best offensive player.
Yes.
Coming back from that injury, it's a hell of a job by him. But the other
Wasn't he the best player on the field?
He was the best offensive player on the field, no question about it. But the other story was the Jags have a borderline historic defense. Certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, one of the better overall defenses we've seen. And I don't care that you're going against Tyrod Taylor. You're going up against an NFL team that made the playoffs. And the way they totally and thoroughly shut them down, that Jags defense had an A-plus performance. Now, I understand the competition matters. I understand all those things. But this wasn't bad conditions. It was perfect weather for offensive football, and the Jags defense destroyed them. If the Jags offense had played better, we would be giving the defense more credit. If the Jags had won 24-3, we'd say, oh, okay, the offense played well and the defense was awesome. And late in the game, defense forced a turnover to win the football game. That may or may not have been a catch, but whatever. So I do want to give the Jags defense. That's been their calling card all year. They were excellent yesterday.
Was this one of those, Cece, was this like an old school gritty battle of defenses, or was this just a terrible game?
Jenna, we could do that and we could put a dress on the pig, but it's still a pig.
Okay, I'm trying.
Okay? This game was ugly. Now, we can't make it up. Like, it was so bad. Now, Shady McCoy, what an effort by him. Didn't think he would play in the game. Truly outstanding. But how could Jacksonville, with Blake Bortles, and I got to give a lot of credit to Tom Coughlin, Doug Marrone, like they turned this organization around, because typically bad organizations cannot even win a game when they try to hide their quarterback. But I don't see how they advance. I don't think their defense is legendary after watching Buffalo make some of the plays on them with their lack of wide receivers. And Shady McCoy, they had their hands full with Shady McCoy. So for me, this is the Jags defense that played better the first 12 games of the season.
That's fair.
They have been bleeding leaking oil since the last 4 weeks of the season and into the playoffs.
I was surprised, one last note on this, and then we'll never speak of this game again. I was surprised that the Bills were running the ball. They ran the ball 32 times for 130 yards. That's over 4 yards a carry. Surprised me they had Tyrod Taylor drop back to pass. Well, he threw 37 passes. He ran the ball 7 times. Most of those were not designed runs. So you called in a game that was a one-score game throughout. You called 40-some-odd pass plays. That was odd to me.
Normally, if I'm watching Buffalo, I would have been calling for the backup quarterback. But based on research, I knew Peterman was the backup. And as we could see in those 3 plays, the reason why Tyrod couldn't get benched.
Quickly before we go, are either Blake Bortles or Tyrod Taylor going to be the starting quarterbacks for these teams next year?
I mean, if the Jags upset the Steelers, you're not moving on from Bortles. They're going to pay him $19 million.
Blake Bortles got to go.
Let's see. Titans beating the Chiefs 22-21 on Saturday. What a heartbreaker for Kansas City. What a heartbreaker for Nick Wright.
Yeah.
Alex Smith had him up 18 at the half. That's great. But Marcus Mariota had 2 second-half touchdowns, including one to Marcus Mariota. And Derrick Henry ran wild for 156 yards to help seal the deal. Nick, I ask you this. Was this like a 3 to 6 Tylenol type of afternoon for you?
It was a 4 to 8 cigarette, 3 to 6 vodka type of second half for me.
The Chiefs are trying to kill you.
They're literally trying to kill him.
Just give me a moment here, if you would. In NFL history, 4 times a team's blown a playoff game where they had an 18-point lead at halftime or greater. 2 of them were some of the most memorable games ever. The Frank Reich game. Remember that one, CC?
Oh, that was an amazing game.
How about last year's Super Bowl? That one's pretty memorable. And the other 2 are Chiefs playoff games coached by Andy Reid in the last 4 years. I brought some props. I don't typically do that. I just want to show the camera this. That is a Joe Montana Chiefs pennant. You know why I brought it? Because Joe Montana was the quarterback the last time the Chiefs won a home playoff game. I'm going to show you something else. This is an autographed Lake Dawson jersey. Now, you might say, who's Lake Dawson? Some of his family might say, who's Lake Dawson? I'm going to bet.
Notre Dame graduate, wide receiver for the Chiefs.
Only person in the world that has an autographed Lake Dawson jersey. That's how long I've loved this team. And this is what they've done to me in my memory since Joe Montana was the quarterback. How about losing a 10-7 playoff game at home where you missed 3 field goals? That's the Lynn Elliott game. How about losing a 14-10 playoff game at home against the Broncos when you blow a fourth-quarter lead? How about losing a 38-31 home playoff game to the Colts? You lose a game where the other team doesn't punt the football, and you don't punt the football either. How about losing 45-44 to the Colts? They had the dignity to do that one on the road, but you blew a 28-point lead, and you gave up a critical touchdown after the quarterback fumbled the ball to himself. How about last year, where you lost a home playoff game to the Steelers, where you scored 2 touchdowns, they scored 0. That's like a bad math problem. How do you lose a game where you score twice, the other team scores 0 times? And then yesterday, or whatever day it was,
Saturday,
the forward progress game. The game where you have an 18-point lead to the Titans. One of the worst teams to make the playoffs in a decade in the NFL. Where the quarterback throws a touchdown pass to himself.
Last time that happened, I was in the playoff game. It was Brad Johnson. He threw one. So at least the Chiefs are doing things that we had seen before, at least once in NFL history.
CC, I can't say I'm surprised. I should know it was coming. I told you I shouldn't buy into this team. I told you I shouldn't put my faith in this team. I had the Chiefs for the 2nd straight year. I truly believe the Kansas City Chiefs could have beaten the Patriots in the playoffs. And for the 2nd straight year, they're not going to get a chance because they blow a home playoff game. That's all I got. Is the show still on?
It's a tough loss. It's a tough loss. But you could be the Jets and not be in the playoffs. So
I would prefer that.
No, you wouldn't.
Careful.
No, you wouldn't because you're in the playoff. But I'm going to tell you, I like Andy Reid.
I know.
But I can't avoid criticizing him. Like it's not by just chance these things keep happening to Andy Reid.
What's the criticism? Was it not running Kareem Hunt enough? Was it lackluster play calling in the second half? Was it no creativity? What's the criticism?
Every time we get in a situation like with Andy Reid, it's not one situation. It's play calling. It's clock management. It's choking under the pressure. Like, it can't just keep happening to one guy, and it follows Andy Reid no matter where he goes. And I believe he is a very good football coach. But 21-3
against the Titans at home.
I got to stop telling, because there's a lot of fans that we have, they don't know how hard it is to win in Kansas City. I keep saying, oh, that's one of the hardest places to win. Obviously not when the Titans go in there and win in the playoffs.
Yeah, you mentioned, here's a criticism. In the game you're leading throughout, Kareem Hunt has 6 carries in the first quarter, and 5 the rest of the game.
Yes.
You run
Why?
a sprint option like you're at Oregon on 3rd and 1 with Alex Smith. It's just, I get it. Andy Reid is great because he always makes the playoffs. What damn good is it? Why do I want? You said I don't want to be the Jets. What I don't want is new and inventive ways to hate sports.
I want to know
That's not what I want.
happened. I want to know why it happens. I want to know what it is about Andy Reid or this team or Alex Smith or Kareem Hunt or whoever it is that makes this team
So do I, Jenna.
lose.
There is no answer.
Why change play calling in the second half? Why do that?
Well, it was interesting, too, after the game that Andy Reid talked about, because what we thought about going into the game was they had won 4 in a row, and they had changed the play caller. Andy Reid talks about him calling plays after the game.
They're with the
A
sheet.
control freak. All right? What they were doing was successful. Somehow, Andy Reid got back into the play calling business, which also led to them losing.
And we don't love to talk about officiating on the show, and the Chiefs lost because they deserved to lose. But I do want to say, Jeff Triplett and what ended up being his final game ever.
He retired.
It's a hell of a send-off, man. Calling forward progress on a quarterback sack where he just gets smacked and drops the ball, this was called forward progress. By the way, the Chiefs recovered it. The Titans end up getting a field goal. That's not reviewable because they called forward progress. If that play is forward progress, then every fumble in NFL history where the ball isn't punched out from behind is forward progress. I've never seen that called forward progress. So I hope you enjoy your retirement, Mr. Triplett.
It's a shame that you're not more fired up about this. I was hoping we'd get more emotion, and sadly we did. But what's okay. All right, let's move on, and we'll let that sit and marinate for just a little bit.
Is Belichick going to coach Chiefs next year?
On Friday, we did talk about the bombshell story out of New England about a rift between Bob Kraft, Tom Brady, and said Bill Belichick. And just as a refresher, Brady reportedly asked Kraft to force Belichick to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, leaving Belichick, quote, frustrated and demoralized. Now, the trio released a joint statement calling the report exaggerated and inaccurate. More fuel to fire, though. Belichick reportedly sees an opening to coach the Giants, a team both coordinators, Matt Patricia and Josh McDaniels, also interviewed for over the weekend. Here's Brady discussing this entire situation.
I have a great relationship with Coach Belichick. We've worked together for 18 years. There's no coach I'd rather play for. And I've loved my experience here. I certainly couldn't be the player I am today without playing for such a great coach. So I see these as all positive things. And I think for so long, we've proven that we ignore the noise, we do our job, we speak for ourselves, and we focus on what we need to do to help the team win. I think for a long time, we've done a great job of winning games, and it forces people to be creative with what they talk about and the things that they write and things that they may speculate on, because diagnosing football plays doesn't get the attention that some of these other things might.
So, guys, we live here in New York, so it's hard not to hear everything that was going on the last couple of days about the potential opening and Belichick maybe coming in, and it was really blown out of proportion. But let's just sort of leave this where it is. With what you know right now, CC, would you be surprised if Bill Belichick left New England after
I'd be shocked.
Season?
Yes, absolutely. Why would he want to work for another owner? Like, why would he want to do that? Why would he want to change? He can't change the culture in the Giants. How long does it take him to do that? 3 years? 2.5 years? I mean, I don't think Belichick's in the position where he does not like his situation as far as with the Kraft family. He is the general manager. He manages the salary cap. He controls everything in New England. And I don't think Bill would be interested in coming to New York. Bill's got the Boston media under control. All right? The national media that comes to Boston, they're under control because he has set kind of a template for how everything's going to be conducted there. I don't think he can recreate that anywhere else. And I think his relationship with Mr. Kraft. Now, you have to realize, too, Tom Brady's statement saying that, this is just noise. Well, I've been around long enough, Tom. I've covered your whole career almost. I was here when Spygate happened. Remember that? Nothing happened there. They're just rumors. People don't like us. What about Deflategate? I was around when that happened, too. Remember that? People spreading rumors about us. No one touched the balls. Got penalized for both of those. Now, all of a sudden, they're saying there's a rift in the... I'm not surprised by that because all relationships, marriage, business, you have tough times. But Mr. Kraft realizes he has someone special in Belichick. Belichick can't be forced to trade Garoppolo before the trade deadline because it didn't make sense to keep him once they had started the season. They couldn't franchise him. They had offered him a long-term contract. So the only solution when you get into the last week of the trade deadline was to trade Jimmy. Now, to say that Kraft forced him, I don't know if all that's true. So there is some truth to the story. How much of it is true and worrying about Belichick going to the Giants, I have zero worries about him being the coach of the New York Giants in 2018.
I can't key on a specific team he would go to. I think the Giants are interesting because he has a history there. He's clearly an East Coast guy. From what everything I read about him, he really likes like Nantucket in that area, and so the idea of him coming out west doesn't seem to really be attractive to him. The reason that I would not be nearly as shocked as Cris is in these stories, I always try to ask myself, okay, who's talking? Who is the person that decided it is in my interest to get this information out there? And it is either Bill Belichick and someone close to him, in which case there is enormous validity to it, or if it's not Belichick, he knows it's not him. Then it has to be someone either with Tom Brady or Robert Kraft. This story doesn't get published without someone close to one of the primary three people, not by that journalist, without either one of those primary three people talking to him off the record or someone incredibly close to him. So either Belichick is the one talking, in which case he obviously wants to set the narrative he could leave, or Belichick is coming into work the day the story publishes and saying, wait, who wants to set the narrative that I could leave? And so that's why I can't brush it aside. Cris brings up, I think, great points that we had overlooked about how hard it is to put together a staff, how hard it is to set a culture.
Even the video stuff, nobody thinks about that.
I think all really those things are important points. And so I can't just, it's not as easy as, yep, just pick up and all of a sudden where you go, your New England culture's there.
Also, we haven't put in, you can't move laterally in the NFL. Bill Belichick, he is the general manager. He's everything. So he couldn't go to the Giants unless the Giants gave him draft picks. All right? John Snyder tried to interview. He's the general manager. Green Bay put in a request for him to interview. Seattle denied the request. But he can interview. But he can go to Green Bay. But he can't. Now they hired someone. But it would have taken compensation draft picks. It would take draft picks and some other things to be able to get Belichick. And we don't know what Belichick's contract is. We act like we know what's going on in New England, and we don't.
Well, the one qualifier there is, the last point you said is exactly right. We don't know what Belichick's contract is. For all we know, this is the last year of his contract. Like, it's probably not, but like you said, we don't know. It was reported this week and he makes $12 million a year. No one knows. We don't know what his official title is. So you're right. We don't know that he even is able to leave, but we also don't know that he definitely can't leave because they are very opaque with what his exact contract is.
Well, this is the thing we know. He can't leave without compensation. That right there I can say.
Okay.
All right? He is the general manager and the head coach. And you cannot move laterally in the league. So they would have to come up with compensation for him. So where are the Giants if you give up a couple first-round picks and Eli Manning is your quarterback and you don't have cap space? Oh, that's a great place for Bill Belichick for his retirement. Dealing with the New York media with a football team that's not very good and you got no draft picks.
No, your point is very well taken, and it's a good point. I would imagine that any team would give up just about anything they can if they associate success with Bill Belichick to get the likes of Bill Belichick, including making him the general manager and putting him in charge of everything.
I just think it's impossible, but it's a good reach. It's a good weekend news story. I'm willing to bet y'all whatever amount of money y'all want that Bill Belichick would not be the coach of the Giants next year.
Hold on.
We'll go to the next segment. And you guys y'all write down the number for what y'all willing to lose. Okay.
That can be a good bet.
I'll do that.
Even if it's still on the board. Like,
look,
if it's
write down the number that y'all are willing to lose. All right,
you're gonna need some odds because it's not 50-50.
Well, you just told the people.
0%.
You told the people. Oh,
it was on the board. CC.
No, I'll give y'all 2-1. Write down the number.
That would say it's
Bill Belichick will be the coach. Why would I trade away?
8-1.
Why would I trade away my two backups and leave Kraft and them with nothing but an old quarterback?
If you're mad, Bill Belichick might do that.
Okay. Yep.
Let's move on to tonight's big game. It is Alabama, it is Georgia, it is the college football championship. Georgia coming off a crazy win against Oklahoma, needing 2 overtimes to beat Baker Mayfield and company in the Rose Bowl. Alabama had a much easier time beating Clemson in the Sugar Bowl. Sugar beats roses. Bama coming in as a 4-point favorite in this one. Here's what Kirby Smart and Nick Saban have to say about the big game.
We're honored and privileged to compete against what's a great program, and they've done a tremendous job. And I think it's kind of lost in the shuffle of how well they have been able to compete at a high level for a long time and almost take it for granted at times.
I think it's two great teams. It'll be a great competitive game, and our players are certainly looking forward to the challenges and the opportunity of playing in the championship game.
This one's confused you all morning long, CC. Who you like in this one?
It's not confusing. It's just hard to bet against Alabama
Okay.
because I know their roster. Kirby Smart in his second year in Georgia, he does not have that roster where he wants it. Now, Kirby Smart was the #1 recruiter for Alabama for a long, long time, also being their defensive coordinator. So not only is this about supremacy in the SEC, but this is about recruiting. Nick Saban, one of his favorite states to recruit, it neighbors with Alabama, is Georgia. There are a lot of good football players, probably more good football players in Georgia per capita than in California, Texas, and Florida. All right? They don't have as many people, but per quality
capita,
players. Yeah. So there's a lot of messages going on here. This is Nick Saban's system that's gone on to Georgia. Now, is Georgia the team that stands up to Alabama? They've been in the college playoff in all 4 years. They've lost twice of those. Both times they were a huge favorite and got upset. I'm pulling for the upset in this, calling for the upset in this one. Georgia beats Alabama. Georgia's defensive line gets after their quarterback, creates some turnovers. This Alabama team is good, but it's not one of the great teams that I've seen. And now there are other teams. It may not be fair because it is good enough to win the national championship. Right. But, man, they've been so dominant and done it for a long time, but their skilled players on the offense side just aren't as good as they have been.
It's a testament to what Alabama's done the last decade.
Yes.
That a team that is not one of their 4 best teams they've had over the decade might win the damn national title. Like
yes.
you're
yes.
you're not saying they're a bad team. It's just in comparison to the great teams that we've seen. So Nick Saban is an interesting guy. I don't know if you saw this. On Tuesday, after the college semifinal, you know what he had Alabama doing? Practicing in shoulder pads, full practice. Like we're not taking it light. I know you guys have played a full season. I know you guys just came off the biggest win of the year against the defending national champion. Go put the pads on and hit on Tuesday. We're going to treat it just like a regular Monday practice, whatever it would be, given the fact the game was on a Monday. I feel like that's not the practice, but the mentality that we've been here. This is nothing new, is a big edge. You look at the Georgia players, that true freshman quarterback.
Yes.
The biggest game of his life was the SEC championship game. Then the biggest game of his life was last Monday. Now the biggest game of his life is today. 3 games in a row, he's played what was, up to that moment, the biggest game of his life. The guys on Alabama that matter, all of them have played for a national title. Almost all of them have won a national title.
Yes.
They've been playing in enormous games. This is tied for like their 3rd biggest game ever. That semifinal game was like tied for their 6th biggest game ever. I feel like the experience, even though I think Fromm is a more talented passer than Jalen Hurts, I don't even think that's debatable.
Yes.
I think this is where I think experience is going to matter. This is where I think coaching experience is going to matter. And you don't have to beat Alabama, what we have seen, unless it was LSU a decade ago.
Yep.
You need a dynamic run-pass option at quarterback.
Dual threat quarterback.
Georgia's going to try to beat them playing Alabama's game. I don't love dynasties in college sports, so I am rooting for Georgia. I can't pick against Alabama when someone's trying to beat them at their game. I think it's a close, low-scoring game. If I were to bet it, I'd bet the under. The way I'm going, that almost assuredly means take the over, America. But I like Alabama in this one.
One thing about the freshman quarterback of Georgia, Fromm, he will be playing in the NFL one day. Okay. Now, he might look like a freshman tonight, but one day he'll be playing on Sunday. He has all the things that you would want in a young quarterback.
I'm Jenna Wolfe, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.